whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irarangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere aki nei, veggie crops could be left to rot as the cost of getting them to market skyrockets. So what exactly is pushing the price of a stir-fry through the roof? An official suspect is identified in the case of missing British girl Madeleine McCann 15 years after she disappeared in Portugal. The Canterbury town basically forced a shower in a car park because their tap water is a tasty shade of brown and gives them a rash. Swift by name but not by nature, the little Suzuki car parked up at a regional airport for 2 years. Who and where is the owner? Palmerston North's getting all revved up over a major stock car championship, and a little tea time chat about Fatburgs. Yummo!
RNZ News at 5. Good afternoon. Ahi Marie. I'm Evie Ashton. A teenager jailed for her part in the violent home invasion of a 90-year-old live-in woman who died weeks later of a brain injury has been granted parole. Grace Virtue died 25 days after the invasion of her property in Horowhenua, where she lived alone in November 2019. Jimmy Ellingham has more.
The teenage girl, aged 17, was jailed for 2.5 years for Grace Virtue's manslaughter. The parole board has today confirmed the teenager will be released from prison, saying a full written decision will be issued within the next fortnight. Grace Virtue's daughter-in-law, Jenny Virtue, says she's not impressed about the decision, but she's not surprised, given, she says, that the justice system is a joke. The teen was aged 15 at the time of the offending. 2 other girls involved were aged 14 and 15.
A lawyer representing the whānau of a Taranaki man shot and killed by police last weekend says unfortunately his death isn't unique. 22-year-old Chaos Price was shot after he rammed a police car on State Highway 3 between New Plymouth and Waitara on Saturday night. Police say he was attempting to hijack a private vehicle when the fatal shots were fired. He was unarmed and no firearms were recovered from the scene. Justice advocate Julia Whaiputi says Chaos Price's death is indicative of a wider problem.
We see the numbers for police killing young Māori, and it is disproportionate, it is huge, it is whānau being taken away far too early by Crown and police action.
She says the issue isn't young Māori men behaving badly. Chaos Price's funeral is tomorrow. The Prime Minister is wrapping up her full final day overseas after a pivotal sit-down with her Japanese counterpart. The 2 leaders met in Tokyo overnight and agreed to negotiate a deal to share more top-secret material between both countries. Our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch, is in Japan.
Jacinda Ardern has been jet-setting through Tokyo today, stopping off at a cookie time store and a rugby stadium and then speaking at a business event. It all fades against last night, though, when Ms Ardern sat down with Japan's Prime Minister Fumio Kishida. New Zealand is seeking to bolster security ties in the Indo-Pacific as China grows more assertive. Ms Ardern says it's hoped the information sharing arrangement will promote peace and stability and prevent any escalation of conflict.
Some fruit and vegetable growers say they may be forced to let crops rot as record inflation takes hold. Inflation has reached a 30-year high of 6.9%. Tomatoes, broccoli and lettuces have increased by more than 50% year on year, but growers say they could go up even more. The president of United Fresh, Jerry Prendergast, says increasing costs are hitting them hard. You can hear more on this story in Checkpoint shortly. The National Party is calling on the government to scrap a bill which would change Rotorua's electoral rules. The Rotorua District Council Representation Arrangements Bill would implement a Māori ward and general ward with 3 seats each, as well as 4 at-large seats. Despite Labour championing the bill, a report by Attorney General David Parker today found it was discriminatory and couldn't be justified. National's Paul Goldsmith says the bill now has no grounds to proceed.
You don't solve any problems of the past by undermining a basic liberal democratic principle of equal suffrage and one person having the same voting rights as another.
The public can have its say on the bill until May the 4th. One of the people reported today to have died with COVID-19 was aged between 10 and 19. The other 12 deaths were people in their 70s, 80s and 90s. The Ministry of Health reported 9,390 community cases of COVID-19. 522 people are in hospital, with 15 in ICU or high dependency units. To sport, and significant changes have been made to the New Zealand Rugby Board with the appointments of former Governor-General Dame Patsy Reddy and Dunedin-based lawyer Rowena Davenport. It lifts the number of women on the 9-member board from 2 to 3, with Reddy and Davenport joining New Zealand Māori Board Chair Farah Palmer. Davenport, who became the first woman to chair a major provincial union in New Zealand when she took control of the Otago board in 2019, says NZR is moving in the right direction when it comes to diversity.
We really want to ensure that diversity in all its forms and there's greater equity right across the sport. There's a lot of positive inroads into achieving that, and my appointment to the board, Dame Patsy Reddy's appointment, I think they're all positive steps towards achieving these goals.
Meanwhile, the Chiefs coach, Clayton McMillan, says a short tour of Australia will be beneficial for them after half a season of bruising New Zealand derbies. The Chiefs play the Waratahs in Melbourne tonight before facing the Reds in Brisbane next Friday. McMillan believes the Australian teams are much stronger this year after winning just 2 Trans-Tasman games between them in 2021. Tonight's game kicks off at 9 p.m. And the New Zealand heavyweight great David Tua is set to join one of boxing's most elite clubs. The 49-year-old will be inducted into the Sports Hall of Fame at a ceremony in Los Angeles this weekend. Tua, who unsuccessfully challenged British legend Lennox Lewis for 3 world titles in 2000, will be inducted alongside American great Sugar Ray Leonard and Layla Ali, the daughter of Muhammad Ali. That's the news.
Tomorrow morning, Bill Browder has put his life on the line to combat Vladimir Putin. Jennifer Egan, author of the Pulitzer Prize-winning A Visit from the Goon Squad, has a new book out, The Candy House, and we'll check out the Venice Biennale. Call Kim Hillaho. Join me tomorrow morning from 8 on RNZ National.
You're on Checkpoint next with Lisa Owen. First, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Saturday. From Northland to Waikato, also Taumaranui, Coromandel, Taupo and Western Bay of Plenty. Cloudy periods with isolated showers. For Eastern Bay of Plenty and Gisborne as well as Hawke's Bay, rain possibly heavy with thunderstorms and localised downpours, easing to showers this evening, becoming fine in the Bay of Plenty tomorrow. For the remainder of the North Island and also for Nelson, isolated showers spreading north until tonight and again in the west late tomorrow, otherwise it's fine. Bulla and Westland mostly fine with the odd shower north of Hokitika. Cloud and showers are increasing tomorrow afternoon. Marlborough, Canterbury and Otago except for Clutha, a few showers today, fine tomorrow. For Clutha, Southland and Fiordland, showers mainly about Fiordland and the south coast, turning to rain in Fiordland tomorrow evening. And for Kohu, the Chatham Islands, mostly cloudy. There's rain this evening, possibly heavy, then a few showers tomorrow. It's 7 minutes past 5. We'll have news headlines for you at 5:30.
Nā mihi iwi, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Coming up, Portuguese prosecutors officially declare someone a suspect in the disappearance of British toddler Madeleine McCann. But we begin tonight with the cost of living. Just when we thought it couldn't get any higher, fruit and veggie growers say they may be forced to let crops rot as record inflation takes hold. Tomatoes, broccoli and lettuces have already increased by more than 50% year on year. But with the rising cost of fertiliser, wages and fuel, growers are warning prices could rise even further. And as Louise Tanuth reports, the days of finding bargain produce are fast running out.
Senior Manager at Stats New Zealand, Aaron Beck, doesn't paint a rosy picture of how much more we're being stung at the checkout for our fruit and veggies.
Fruit and vegetables increased most over the year. They increased by 18%. Lettuce, broccoli have all moved a great deal. Tomatoes too, all by more than 50% over the year.
And President of United Fresh, Jerry Prendergast, says that's because inflation is crippling the industry.
Excessive costs, not only your normal fertilisers, which is a direct reflection of what's happening in Ukraine, the increased costs of wages, fuel, rates and insurances.
He says that means growers are weighing up whether they can actually afford to sell their produce.
Do I harvest my crop Is my crop more valuable to me to simply place the rotary hoe through that crop and walk away from it? We're at a point now where for many growers they're having to make a decision.
Apples in the far one with berry fruit and so on and bits and pieces, and then in the big rooms on the way on the other side you've got a lot of imported product, grapes, pineapple.
Downstairs at United Fresh's Mount Wellington warehouse, the floor is full of almost every fruit or vegetable you could imagine. Crates are piled high with boxes of tomatoes, bags of spinach and bunches of bananas. Jerry Prendergast says this will all cost more if growers decide it's not feasible to stock shelves.
We won't see those low prices of the 2000s that we've been constantly able to see on the shelves in the last 3 or 4 or 5 years. We'll see a new phase in the cost of fruit and vegetables, and that will be higher.
He says inflation needs to be considered when it comes to bargaining between growers and retailers for the right price. Meanwhile, at the Wesley markets in the Auckland suburb of Mount Roskill today, the rain did nothing to deter a bustling crowd. At Countdown, Telegraph cucumbers are selling for $2.99 each and tomatoes are $5.99 a kilo. But here at the markets, cucumbers are $5 a kilo and tomatoes are 99 cents a kilo. Shoppers here say it's a no-brainer compared to the supermarket.
Ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. So much better here. Like, for example, lemons I can get here for $5 a kilo. Bananas, everything. Pears, $2.50 a kilo here. Supermarket, I think it's $6 or $7 a kilo.
Yeah, it's much cheaper here.
How often do you come to the market?
Mom goes like the Sunday market, and she comes here as well. So like twice a week, once a week.
Surprisingly, they can do good deals, on avocados. All my favourites. The cost of living is going up exponentially. Some things have doubled in price, so I can't keep up with it.
And Jerry Prendergast says if we want cheap produce, we're fast running out of options.
The days of the 99 cent whatever it is have gone.
It is the kind of price increase that results in a lot of belly aching. Those new inflation figures show grocery food prices have gone up 6.7% in the past year. If we break it down further, fruit and veggies is up a monster 18%. So how do those increases break down? Well, joining us now is Chair of Vegetables New Zealand, John Murphy. Kia ora, John.
Kia ora.
Hey, you grow garlic, right?
Yeah, garlic and shallots.
Yeah, so give us an example here of how your increased costs have factored in over the last year. What's got more costly for you?
I think all growers have seen particularly fuel, things like fertiliser and staff costs, and also pure availability of staff really impacted.
So how much in your operation and experience would that push up the price of your product?
Well, unfortunately, we can't simply pass those costs along. So while they've affected our bottom line, and it's been a very tough year for us, our price is really set by the availability of the market. So we're really price takers.
So are you saying that as consumers, we actually aren't paying the full cost of the vegetables that we're getting at the moment, that they're actually more expensive to produce than what we're paying?
Sometimes it's definitely the case, and in some areas we've got reports of crops being bypassed or chopped into the ground because the market price simply doesn't cover the cost of getting them to market.
What kind of crops are you talking about there, John?
I understand it's happening with some lettuce crops at the moment, and it really is a shame because all that work has gone into those crops. But being price takers, there's a real disconnect between the cost of growing fruit and vegetables and what's received in the market.
Talk me through what you mean by that, the disconnect.
Well, we're in a very dynamic industry where supply and demand really affects what we can get on the day for our products. And for some of us, like in garlic, we're planting garlic up to a year ahead of when it's actually in stores for people. So we really have to make an assessment of what will be needed at that time. Before that happens, we have to grow it well. We're subject to the weather. And then we have consumer demand on top of that as well. So it's a very complicated situation, figuring out how much we should grow. And I guess that's the alarming thing at the moment. Because costs have been growing for more than a decade, with farm gate returns stagnant, some growers are really looking at whether they keep doing it at all.
Because here's the thing, and you would appreciate this, John. I'm sure you hear this all the time. When a consumer looks at a cauliflower and it's $8, right, and they're in the supermarket, they say to themselves, how much of that is going to the grower? Can you answer that question?
Yeah, and look, that is alarming. And what I can say is that in most cases, it's less than half that. And it's the other side of that is, though, that if you're buying seasonally, that gets around some of those issues. So at the moment, whilst we're seeing that 18% figure that you've talked about, you can buy a head of broccoli for $2.20 in those major retailers. And so there is good buying there, but you do have to look for it.
Yeah, if you buy seasonally, another example, let's say whatever vegetable is in season, what percentage of that shelf price will be going to the grower? I mean, what I'm asking you is it the supermarket that's getting the cream here?
Look, I think the Commerce Commission in their recent findings suggests that the supermarket is getting quite a bit of it, but that's not the whole story either. And so I think that needs to be sorted out, and we do need to look at where the money is falling out of the chain. But costs have gone up, and so we look at those fuel, fertiliser and staff costs. We have to absorb them during the growing season. And then what happens after that, we do need to look into it. But generally, our businesses are hurting. I can say that for sure.
How much higher do you reckon prices are going to go, and what's going to drive that? So, for example, we hear about the Ukraine and fuel prices. Are we seeing that already in the cost of, say, a head of broccoli, or is that still coming down the pipe?
I think it's still coming down the pipe, and so I think we've seen some of the increases, but I think that spike is likely to be bedded in, unfortunately. And I think, as you quoted Jerry Prendergast earlier, saying the days of the 99-cent deal are over, I think that's fair to say.
Really appreciate your time, John. That's John Murphy from Vegetables New Zealand there. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback. Nō reira, ānei nā kaupapa mō te hōtaka nei. Do you shop around for your veg, or do you go to the one-stop shop, just to the supermarket, or are you going somewhere else? Let us know where the bargains are. We'd love to hear from you. Text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Now to the Canterbury town that's got makeshift showers in a car park because what runs out of their taps gives some people rashes. The water in Springfield runs brown or yellow, and in the last year there have been plenty of boil notices and murky water. The town was hit by flooding nearly a year ago and has had ongoing problems with the water quality ever since. Our reporter Rachel Graham and cameraman Nate McKinnon have the story.
In the small South Island town of Springfield, the Southern Alps and the rural scenes make an impressive backdrop as you drive through. But the water tanker and shower unit installed outside the community hall on the main road point to problems afoot. Every day for the last 2 months, Bronwyn Squires heads across the road to pick up all the water she needs to keep her cafe, Taste of Kiwi, operating. She has to get water from the tanker for anything that goes out to the customers or is used for cleaning. She has to do it all again when she gets home.
So we've got to go and get our water, and then we've got to bring it home, we've got to boil it, and then, you've got to use it for cleaning your teeth, doing all that sort of stuff. You're washing, showering. They've put shower blocks over across the road. I'm not too sure how many people are using them, but, they've done that, so that's really good.
When we visited Amy Albin, the water running out of her tap has a yellow tinge to it. She says her 3- and 5-year-olds have been taught that water is yuck and they shouldn't drink it.
Washing them is, I don't want to wash my children in a bath that is dirtier than what they are, and their skin reacts as well. So they've both got sensitive skin, and it just comes out flaky and red and itchy, so we can't even bathe them here.
She says the extra workload is exhausting and frustrating. Jack Wilson's household has also suffered rashes from the water, and they want something done. He can't understand why the council has brought in diggers to re-divert the river, which feeds their water intake, a year after the floods.
We need to know why they've destroyed our environment. This isn't what we wanted. We just wanted clean water, and clean water is going to be achieved upstream from here.
Selwyn District Council's Infrastructure Group Manager, Murray Washington, says the river was re-diverted when it was recently discovered it was going through thick vegetation, which may have contributed to the water quality issues. A major communication link between the town and the council is via the Springfield Township Committee. Springfield resident and committee member Emma Stead says the council is making progress.
They've been looking at all sorts of options. We've had the short-term option with the water tanker that's been brought in. The medium-term option is the water is going to be piped up from Sheffield to ease the water issues we've got. And then the long-term, the council is looking at another treatment for our water.
Springfield residents we spoke to said the town has had poor quality water for years, but this situation is worse and dragging out. Mr Washington from the council says they've looked at possible solutions to the ongoing risks associated with drawing water from the Kauai River for a number of years. His comments have been voiced.
The reality of Springfield's geology means there are no simple solutions. Despite extensive searching, no safe and effective groundwater source has been located that would fully supply Springfield, leaving the river as the only available source.
The Selwyn District Council is one of a number of councils opposed to the government's 3 water reforms, which would see water services moved from council control to a centralised body. Despite a year of water issues, Emma Stead doesn't think the reforms will help the situation.
What concerns me is we would be a very, very, very small fish in a huge pond in that case, so I would be concerned. I don't think it would solve anything.
Jack Wilson is also doubtful about whether a large centralised body would help. He says it's hard enough to get the attention of those in charge in Rolleston, let alone in Wellington.
I think keeping it localised, keeping local people making local decisions about their local environment.
The Selwyn District Council says the new pipeline bringing water from nearby Sheffield should be completed mid-July, depending on the weather. It says it is also working on a number of other projects which it hopes together will resolve the issues for Springfield, so that people here can trust what runs out of their tap.
It's a swift mystery that's been an absolute slow burner. A blue 2018 Suzuki model car apparently abandoned in the New Plymouth Airport car park. Parked up as people and planes come and go, the tidy little Suzuki Swift has been there through the pandemic, with no one returning to collect it for 2 years. Now the airport's giving it one last push to find the owner before it tows Little Blue away. Joining us now is New Plymouth Airport CEO David Scott. Hi, David.
Hi, Lisa. How are you?
I'm very well. This is a bit of a mystery, isn't it? I mean, how hard have you tried to locate them?
We've solved the mystery, Lisa.
Oh.
So we actually knew who the car belonged to some time ago. We want to start off by saying that we welcome anybody to New Plymouth Airport and, of course, come and park in our lovely car park. But obviously, when a car is sitting there for too long, it does obviously come a bit cost prohibitive for people. So once we see that a warrant's actually expired on a vehicle, we suspect it's probably been abandoned. So we did know who the car belonged to. However, we were unable to locate the individual. They'd literally disappeared into thin air.
But have you found them in Australia, David?
We don't know where they are, Lisa. We still don't know where the owner of the car actually is. But we have received news today from a finance company who recognised the number plate and realised they had a claim on the vehicle. So it has now been towed and is in the possession of that finance company.
Do you reckon they recognise the licence plate, or they got a call from Checkpoint saying, hey, you've got finance on this vehicle?
Gosh, I don't know. If you helped us out, we certainly appreciate it. But, whichever way it worked out, we're pretty happy.
Yeah, because I'm curious. You guys knew who the owner was, right, because of the licence plate registration. I mean, what kind of effort went into trying to find them?
Yeah, look, quite a bit, Lisa. It is tricky for us because we obviously can't get information from airlines where somebody's travelled or anything like that. So we did have a name. The police were involved as well because we did want to see if there's anything nefarious that happened with the vehicle, but gladly there wasn't. It just seemed like a case of pure abandonment, and I suspect you're right. The individual is probably long gone. This happens all over the world, that people abandon their cars when times get tough at airports, and I guess that it's just trickled all the way down to the Naki.
How did you notice it? How did someone notice it?
Yeah, look, we're a relatively small operation. We've got just over 400 car parks. When the lockdown happened, the car park was pretty much abandoned. Really, there were a handful of cars there, but as the lockdown eased and people started coming back, the cars did disappear. But this little blue Swift just didn't seem to go anywhere. And after a while, once we saw that the registration had expired on it, we knew that probably it had been abandoned.
How much is owed in parking fees? Can you give us a ballpark?
Yeah, we could. It's probably over $9,000 by now. But look, the reality is for us, the car park hasn't been exactly jam-packed over the last couple of years. For us, we were hoping actually that the owner might come back and claim it. And of course, we would have had a discussion with them then about the fees. But we're not too tough in the Naki. We would have worked something out for them, but alas, it didn't happen.
Yeah, I find it really curious because here's the thing, right? We saw the challenge in this, and our producer set about trying to track this person down. We found a name. Yep. We found the finance company. It was us. It was Checkpoint that contacted the finance company that has involvement with this vehicle, and we've tracked the owner, we think, to Australia.
Oh, right. No, that's news to me, Lisa. Yeah,
okay.
News to me. Yep.
So what happens to the little blue Suzuki now?
Oh, you'd have to talk to the finance company. I imagine they've probably got a little Boeing on it, and last I heard it was on its way to Turner's auction in Taranaki.
Oh, so they've already picked it up. It's in there.
They certainly have. It happened. Yep, picked up this afternoon.
Well, a large part of the mystery solved. We really appreciate that. Thanks for joining us. That's New Plymouth Airport CEO David Scott there. And the mystery of that little Suzuki Swift, we think, is solved. Thanks, Checkpoint producer. It is 25 minutes past 5. Kia mau tonu mai. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Let's get to some of your feedback now. A lot of you getting in touch about the price of fruit and veg. Grant says at least harvest these crops and sell them to pig or cattle owners. That's in response to some growers saying it's cheaper to destroy their crops and get them to market. Another person says your veggie grower guest seems reluctant to say outright that the growers are being shafted by the supermarkets. I suppose no surprise there, given the Commerce Commission report. Richard says, ain't capitalism great? And then another person says a vegetable auction is the only way to get a fair price for owners. Any other marketing will always result in supermarket domination. Do keep your feedback coming. You can text us on 2101 or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Portuguese prosecutors have officially declared someone a suspect in the disappearance of British toddler Madeleine McCann. The 3-year-old went missing during a family holiday to Portugal in 2007. Investigators believe she was abducted from the holiday apartment where the family was staying. Well, joining us now is the BBC's Simon Jones. Simon, what do we know about this person of interest?
Well, next month it will actually be 15 years since Madeleine McCann disappeared. As you say, she went missing from a holiday apartment while her parents were having dinner at a nearby restaurant. And what happened to her? Well, that remains a mystery to this day, despite international investigations in Portugal, also here in the UK, and also in Germany. It's been agony for her parents. They've always clung to the hope that their daughter is still alive. But the authorities in Germany strongly believe that Madeleine was murdered by a German man. And late last night, we heard from prosecutors in Portugal who have been acting on the request of the German authorities. They've identified a suspect, a person of interest, an arguido, as they put it. Now, they have actually not formally named this suspect, but what we do know is back in 2020, German police said they were investigating a man who they refer to as Christian B. Now, he's currently in jail in Germany for raping a 72-year-old woman in Prader-Lusch back in 2005. He was sentenced to 7 years for that. He's also served time in jail for drug dealing. And the police in Germany say he was regularly living in the Algarve in Portugal between 1995 and 2007.
So, Simon, what is the purpose in naming him a suspect or a person of interest, and why is it happening now?
Well, I think the timing of this is very interesting because in less than 2 weeks' time, something called a statute of limitations would have come into effect. And that means under Portuguese law, it would have no longer been possible to make someone a person of interest or a suspect. But we heard from the Office of Public Prosecutions in Portugal. They say that identifying the suspect now isn't just motivated by timing, but also by what it called strong indications that a crime has taken place. So ultimately, what we could now see is this suspect being transferred to the Algarve for questioning, and it also may buy the authorities more time, plus, of course, allow the authorities here in the UK, in Portugal and Germany to work ever more closely together to try to get evidence against this suspect.
Yeah, so what does happen now in terms of the investigation?
Well, we've spoken to the authorities in Portugal, who also are telling us they are liaising with the German authorities and the British authorities. The Metropolitan Police here in London, who have been carried out an investigation, say this is all being led by the Portuguese police. So I think now we will have to wait and see whether potentially there could be any extradition proceedings to try to get this man, Christian B., from Germany to Portugal for questioning or potentially for charging. But I think it's important to say that there have been a number of investigations over the years, and there have been many false dawns in this case. We've had people named as suspects before who haven't ended up being charged. We've had searches that have taken place, particularly in Prada Luche, where Madeleine McCann went missing, but they haven't unearthed anything of particular note. We've also had in Germany searches taking place linked to this man, Christian B. But the authorities in Germany have been quite open, saying that at the moment, as things stand, they simply don't have enough evidence to bring any charges against Christian B. So I think we'll have to wait and see whether this is going to be a significant development, because we have had potentially significant developments in the past that ultimately have not changed the outcome in this case.
Thank you for the update, Simon. That is Simon Jones, BBC reporter there, on the disappearance of Madeleine McCann, and Portuguese prosecutors have officially declared someone a person of interest. Now, a quick traffic update. If you're heading north out of Auckland, there's been a crash on the motorway near Northcote Road. It's being cleared, but go carefully and expect delays if you are driving that way. Kia ora e te iwi e haere nei e checkpoint. It's a green light for the team stock car champs in Palmy North after COVID delays. 96 candles is a lot to fit on a cake. The Queen's birthday celebrations continue, and we chew the fat about fatbergs and the cost of bunged up pipes. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can send us an email. We love to get those. checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It is time to head to the headlines now. Ko iwi anō tēnei.
A teenager jailed for her part in the violent home invasion of a 90-year-old live-in woman who died weeks later of a brain injury will be freed on parole. Grace Virtue died 25 days after the invasion of her property in 2019. The teenage girl, now 17, was jailed for 2.5 years for Virtue's manslaughter. The parole board, in confirming today that the teen will be freed from prison, said a full written decision would be issued within 2 weeks. Some fruit and vegetable growers say they may be forced to let crops rot as record inflation takes hold. Inflation has reached a 30-year high of just under 7%. The price of tomatoes, broccoli and lettuces has increased by more than 50% year on year, but growers say they could go up even more. The president of United Fresh, Jerry Prendergast, says increasing operational costs are hitting growers hard. A lawyer representing the whānau of an unarmed Taranaki man shot and killed by police says his death isn't unique. 22-year-old Chaos Price was shot after he rammed a police car between New Plymouth and Waitara on Saturday night. Police say he was attempting to hijack someone's vehicle when he was fatally shot. Justice advocate Julia Faiputsi says Mr Price's death is indicative of a wider problem, and the issue is not young Māori men behaving badly. The Prime Minister says her government is championing respectful debate about Indigenous rights in Aotearoa. New Zealand's plan to implement the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples is now being drafted. The ACT Party has suggested there's been a palace coup by the Māori caucus intent on decolonising the beehive, but Jacinda Ardern says it's time for respectful debate. One of the 13 people reported to have died with COVID-19 today was aged between 10 and 19. The Ministry of Health has reported a further 9,390 community cases of COVID-19. 522 people are in hospital, 15 of whom are in ICU or high dependency units. The youth is one of the youngest New Zealanders to have died with the virus. Those are the headlines. Our next news bulletin is at 6.
Kia ora rā, e hoa no mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. It is time for the business news now. Ko taku hoa I nai nei, ko Nicholas Poynton. Nicholas, demand for credit continues to plunge. Tell us more.
Yeah, so this is one of the things that we tend to pay quite a bit of attention to because consumer credit is often, or demand for consumer credit is often a good indicator of consumer sentiment. And we've seen a continuation of a trend that's been sort of ongoing for most of this year, really. It's that the appetite for credit has really fallen. That's according to the latest data we've got from one of the main credit reporting firms here, Equifax. It shows that demand for consumer credit, so things like credit cards, down 32% on the same period a year ago. Their mortgage applications, so for home loan credit, down 42% on that period as well. And the main drivers of this is sort of one of the main themes of tonight's show. It's rising inflation. That's necessitated higher interest rates, which effectively has raised the cost of credit. One of the other factors playing into this as well is also those tighter lending rules, be it the controversial changes that were made to the CCCFA Act last year, and also loan-to-value restrictions. People need to have more money, essentially, to be able to get a mortgage. And speaking to Equifax today, they say that, look, we are moving into a very much a changed economic environment. It's different. How different? Well, we won't know, but obviously there's some strong domestic drivers of inflation at the moment, but we look at some of those global factors. We can't say with any confidence when they will begin to subside because a lot of that's been driven by the war in Ukraine and those ongoing supply chain disruptions.
And Nicholas, talk us through the connection between diamonds and Russia.
Yeah, look, diamonds, one of the lesser known commodities that have been caught in the crosshairs of these sanctions that have been placed on Russia. I didn't know this until this morning, but Russia is actually the third largest exporter of diamonds in the world. But obviously those sanctions have made it hard to get those polished stones to their destination markets. But some people have been quite clever in exploiting loopholes because obviously the way sanctions work, if you're New Zealand or the US, you want to import a good from Russia, you can't really do that easily. So what the loophole people have been looking to exploit is by looking to intermediary countries, so sending those stones to countries that haven't placed sanctions on Russia, and from there they can be sent to their final destination. And like when you hear about this and you hear the reports about what's going on in Russia, it sort of does give new meaning to the idea of blood diamonds. And look, this sort of behaviour, these sort of loopholes, they've sort of been talked about a few times now in recent weeks, and it raises the question about whether or not secondary sanctions should be placed on those countries that continue to trade with Russia. Whether or not we'll see any action like this is hard to say, but as the war does continue, and there's no end in sight really, you can probably be sure that we will hear more talk about this in the future.
Quick Friday frolic through the markets, Nicholas.
Yeah, the NZX is down 48 points to 11,908. The dollar trading at 67 US cents and 91.3 Australian.
Ka kite, that is Nicholas Poynton with Business News. Ukraine and the US have denied Russia's assertion it's gained control of the port city of Mariupol. President Putin claimed victory in the biggest battle of the war, declaring the city liberated. It's been the scene of relentless bombardment for weeks. The US says Ukrainian forces still hold ground in the city. Putin ordered his troops to blockade rather than attack a giant steelworks, the last pocket of resistance in the city. Some civilians have been able to leave the southern city, but it's believed thousands remain trapped. The BBC's Bayura Hanga has more.
After a 24-hour journey, they finally reached safety from Mariupol, one of the worst-hit cities in this war. Only 80 people escaped in this convoy. Irina is gently helped off the bus by her daughter Tatiana.
I could not leave at first because my mom can barely walk. There's no way I would have left her behind. There was constant shelling. Even as we were leaving the city, there was some firing.
And what of the people they've left behind? 100,000 civilians are believed to be trapped. There are food shortages, no running water or electricity.
It was a miracle that we found a radio wave where we heard about the evacuation. That helped us to get out. There are pro-Russian separatist vehicles that pull over, but they are not saying anything about evacuations. I think that many people could have got out if they knew that there was an evacuation planned.
After days of negotiations, only a few dozen people have made it out of Mariupol, a drop in the ocean in terms of the numbers of those needing help. And this is what they're fleeing. A full-scale Russian assault to capture the Donbass region in the east. Mariupol, devastated by bombardments. Hundreds of civilians are believed to be trapped alongside the last Ukrainian forces at the Azovstal steelworks. Its bunkers and tunnels stretch for miles. Tapping his feet as he listened to his defense minister hail what he called the liberation of the city, President Putin ordered a halt to the attack on the industrial plant.
I consider the proposed storming of the industrial zone unnecessary. I order you to cancel it. This is a case where we must think about preserving the lives and health of our soldiers and officers. There is no need to climb into these catacombs and crawl underground through these industrial facilities. Block off this industrial area so that a fly cannot pass through.
For those who've escaped severe fighting and a humanitarian crisis, perhaps an opportunity to rebuild their lives. But the fear is more Ukrainians will face a similar fate as this war spreads to more villages and cities.
Jacinda Ardern is wrapping up the final leg of her overseas mission after a pivotal sit-down with Japan's Prime Minister. The two leaders met in Tokyo overnight and emerged with an agreement which will bolster security ties as the world grows more volatile. The Prime Minister heads home tomorrow. Our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch, is in Japan.
The apex of the Prime Minister's trip abroad, the key reason she's here. A sit-down with Japan's PM, Fumio Kishida, leader of the world's third largest economy.
This partnership matters because Japan and New Zealand must cooperate in what is a deeply uncertain global environment.
The meeting comes as Russia wages war on Ukraine and China agitates in the Indo-Pacific. The two leaders left with a plan to nut out a deal to share more classified information when it comes to international security.
There is strong benefit to New Zealand to having ties with partners within our wider region who can give us insight into issues, be they defence, be they security, or more broadly, be they natural disasters.
New Zealand is part of the Five Eyes intelligence network, but Japan is not. A spokesperson for the Prime Minister initially told RNZ the arrangement with Japan would not stretch to spy agencies' intelligence. But today, Jacinda Ardern said that was possible.
Up to the level of top secret and at our discretion.
For both countries, such a deal will have value in monitoring China's movements in the region. The leaders condemned the superpower's actions in the East and South China Seas and indirectly referenced its assertiveness in the Pacific. Their hardline response on Russia also clearly serving more than one purpose.
So it is about demonstrating through global action that there will be swift response should that occur in any other region or country.
The Prime Minister spent her last full day in Tokyo with a series of stops around the city, a visit to Cookie Time store, a rugby stadium, another business event. Tonight she'll be reunited with her former homestay sister at New Zealand's embassy.
I'm excited to see her again.
Jacinda Ardern came to Japan having never spoken to its new PM. She leaves tomorrow with a reinforced friend in the region.
It is 18 minutes to 6. The cost of living is a major issue across the Tasman as well, just a month out from the election. Young voters in the Northern Territory say they want new ideas for tackling climate change, youth crime and the cost of living. The ABC's Jane Barden has more.
There is still a month to go until Election Day, and young voters in the Northern Territory are telling both sides of politics they want to hear commitments to fresh approaches on tackling climate change, youth crime and the cost of living. Our reporter Jane Barden has been speaking with some of them in the marginal Labor-held seat of Solomon, which covers Darwin and Palmerston.
On your mark, get set.
There are hundreds of people out in this Darwin park enjoying a youth day of games and stalls, some including young mum Tia Harris, who's perched on a park bench, already know what issues will decide their vote.
Climate change is a big thing for me. I do worry about the planet, and I feel like we should take more steps to make the earth better.
Solomon has regularly swung back and forth between Labour and the Country Liberal Party. Like many here, Tia Harris hasn't yet decided which way she'll vote.
I actually don't know who's running, so I still have to research that because I'm mainly looking for someone who's going to help with the youth.
She wants more money for long-term solutions to youth crime. The coalition federal government held a $50 million Royal Commission into that in 2017, but has now mostly tried to handball the problem back to the NT government.
I definitely do want to see a big decrease in crime, especially in the shopping centres. I do worry when I do take my daughter to the shops. Like, I don't want to get hurt. I think, honestly, mental health is a big issue along young people. A lot of people think it's just kids running amok, but there's something behind it that's causing that behaviour.
How you doing? I'm Kelvin Williams, mentor at Top End School of Flexible Learning.
Cost of living pressures are top of his mind, but he also wants more federal support for troubled youth.
To try something different within this youth justice space, within the Indigenous crime and statistics space, because we've seen the cycle continue and it's time to break it.
Hi, my name is Manhunter Puntara Mary.
What are some of the most important issues to you that you would like to see addressed for young people?
Just give them music, really, because most of these young boys are usually gifted for making music. But some of these kids that get out of control, they end up getting locked up or hurt. It's scary.
My name's Kyra.
She wants the leaders to focus on big societal changes.
Just equality, because there's definitely inequality, just like gender, race, and what they could do to help. Because even women's wages versus men's wages, it's a very big difference. Yeah.
Another of the young people in the park, Jolly Nguyen, says the promises made in the last weeks of the campaign could be the deciding factor.
I still kind of lean on some of my friends to see who they vote, and I want to see what are the issues right there over there as well to see who I would, finally vote.
And speaking of elections, France heads to the polls again this weekend for the runoff in the presidential election. Latest polls suggest it could be a tight race between the incumbent, Emmanuel Macron, and his far-right challenger, Marine Le Pen. But crucially, millions are said to be undecided. The BBC's Katja Adler reports.
Could this be France's next president? Marine Le Pen, patriotic woman of the people visiting France's forgotten villages, or far-right nationalists hiding behind a carefully reinvented, softer image. How radical are you? I asked.
I'm not radical, sorry. I'm running for president to establish a government of the people, for the people, giving back power to the people.
But these people, and plenty of others in France, remain unconvinced. So close to the elections, emotions are running high.
It's always like this on campaign trail Le Pen. There's protectors, press and protesters wherever you look.
Marine Le Pen remains the outsider in this election, but her popularity has grown. She's focused on voters' number one concern, the spiralling cost of food and fuel here.
Marine Le Pen goes to markets to meet working people like us. She's down to earth. We've always liked her.
Marine Le Pen, even if she tries to distance herself from the extreme right, that's her background, that's her party. I'm voting Macron to keep Le Pen out.
In fact, both presidential candidates have a reputation problem. EU-obsessed and elitist is how Emmanuel Macron's critics describe him. So, at this campaign event in Marseille, he ditched the designer jacket and appealed across party lines to vote for him on Sunday.
The 24th of April is a referendum, for or against the environment, for or against young people. This election can be the start of a new French and European era of great hopes and ambition.
Brussels and Washington are watching all this extremely carefully, especially with the raging Russia-Ukraine crisis. France has the EU's biggest military, its second largest economy. Macron wants to use that to boost EU, NATO and transatlantic relations. Le Pen is Euro and US skeptic with traditionally close ties to Moscow.
Who becomes France's next president is as important abroad as it is at home, for a number of reasons.
I'm really well, Monsieur le Maire.
Marine Le Pen's programme would directly lead to a total collapse of the French economy, which would hurt the other European countries, also a very important economic partner, which is the UK.
Marine Le Pen defends her economic plans, but France's next president, she or he, won't be able to claim the heart of all French people. This is a divided country.
Now, a little public service announcement. If you're having a little Friday snack, you might want to push pause because a Fatburgs caused a raw sewage overflow in Stevens Bay at the gateway to the Abel Tasman National Park. The wetland and beach is being monitored for contamination after a fat residue build-up caused raw sewage to bubble up from a manhole into the bay. Joining us now is Community Infrastructure, Waters and Wastes Manager, Mike Schrewer. Hi, Mike.
Hi, Lisa.
Hey, there's no delicate way to put this, but how much poo do you reckon's come up from the manhole and how far has it gone?
It wasn't too bad, probably a few litres or so, but it's been, it was over a wee while.
Yeah, so I understand there is an offending blockage. Are we talking Fatburgs here, Mike?
We are, yeah. This particular one seems to be particularly from a Fatburg from the catchment of both.
All right. Can you tell me, do you know what's in this thing? How big is it? Where is it?
I think the pipe's about 100 mil diameter, so the old 4-inch pipe. So it's probably close to that sort of size to be big enough to block it. And basically it's made up from oils and greases being discharged down a sink, probably from cooking fats and so on.
Right, so people are having a fry-up and then they biff the hot fats down the pipe, and what happens?
Yeah, so basically once it goes down the pipe, as it cools, it congeals and then solidifies. And then you get other things like wet wipes, obviously a big issue as well for our pipes, and stuff like that collects up on the congealed fat as well and just gets bigger and bigger as particles come down the pipe.
How common is this problem for you guys in your area?
We seem to have some areas that are worse than others. We've got 2 or 3 catchments in particular where we have wet wipes and fats discharged down the drains. Most of our restaurants and so on have oil and grease traps, so they tend to collect it there. So this particular area is a domestic catchment. We've just had a couple of incidents there now.
So it's your home cooks that are doing it?
In this catchment, pretty much, yes, yeah.
Yeah, what kind of stuff have you found in previous Fatburgs that you've had in your area, besides the fat and grease?
Fat and grease, yeah. The biggest issue has been wet wipes, where people have used them and discharged them down the toilet. And often they in themselves will cause a blockage as well. If there's a bit of a crack in the pipe or something else sitting in the pipe, a break or something, the wet wipes will collect there and they'll tend to bundle up and form a blockage as well. But worse for the wet wipes is the actual pumps themselves, because they tend to collect on the impellers and build up. And of course, the more you've got building up, the more it attracts others to collect on them, and eventually it can lead to damage of the pumps, and then the pumps break down and we end up having an overflow from the site.
Understand. So it's like a snowball, basically. It gathers momentum. I mean,
pretty much.
Sounds expensive, Mike, is it?
It can be. You probably a normal call out. You're probably looking at a few $100s just to go on there and if they can hook it out with rods and so on. But if it involves digging it up, you can get into a couple of $1,000s quite quickly. And if you have a pump go down, once you get the cranes in and lift them out and clear them and having to cart the water away while the pump's not operating, you can be up to several $1,000s pretty quickly on a single blockage.
So, Mike, why aren't people getting the message? Don't be flushing that stuff down the loo.
We try hard. Every opportunity has, like this interview, and regular in our news line, which is our local paper from the council. We try and advise people, but I guess once people understand the issues, we get a good response. We generally do a letter drop in a catchment as soon as we have these sort of issues. Because we had one issue in particular recently where someone was throwing clothes down the toilet and it was causing blockages.
Clothes? Clothes down the toilet? Like what? T-shirts
and jeans and so on. We're not sure what the issue was there, but someone was dumping it down. And so we did a letter drop, as we usually do in these circumstances, and it sorts it out for a while. And then, we generally have a good response after a letter drop.
Really appreciate your time, Mike. Thanks for joining us. That's Mike Schrewer there from, he's the Community Infrastructure, Waters and Waste Manager. So bottom line, don't stick your jeans and T-shirts down the loo. Engines are revving and bar tills ringing in Palmerston North for the city's biggest weekend of the year. The Super Stock Teams Champs brings thousands of petrol heads to Manawatu and pumps millions of dollars into the economy. Jimmy Allingham reports.
It's as big as the stock cars fly around the track at Palmerston North's arena. COVID forced a rescheduling of the Teams Champs from their normal February slot, and the orange traffic light means it's all on this Saturday and Sunday nights. Promoter Bruce Robertson says it's the biggest motorsport event in New Zealand. It was supposed to happen over Waitangi weekend, but the move to the red traffic light put that on hold.
This was the date we sort of thought was the furthest we could go out, and we just hoped that we'd come out of red by this stage, and we have.
More than 10,000 visitors are expected to the city, many camping out in a field behind the stock car track, among them Dave Bartholomew. The Napier man has brought along wheels of his own.
It's a classic stock car from 1982. I never did drive here, but at the Teams Champs, no. But I drove for many, many years. Oh, it's a good meeting. It's a really good meeting. Good fun, good atmosphere.
Outside of the action at the track, much of that atmosphere transfers to the city's bars and night spots. Brew Union co-owner Murray Cleghorn is expecting a busy weekend and says it's a fillip for his staff.
So I think it'll be good. It'll be a good spirit lifter for everyone to have a good level of energy, and we're expecting pretty heavy bookings. I heard town's pretty much booked out.
Traditionally, the 15,000 tickets sell out, and while there are a few tickets left this year, the Teams Champs will add more than $5 million to the region's economy. At the arena, track manager Brian Peklowski and his team are working from dawn until after dark, putting the finishing touches on the venue.
The track should be good, as long as it doesn't rain too much more in the next 24 hours. The track will be really good. It'll be a real racy track, I'm thinking, with a bit of rain on it, and it should lend to good racing.
The Champs began in 1981 and attract teams from across New Zealand and, in non-COVID times, the UK. Last year, Rotorua went home with the title. Dean, from Huntly, thinks the Auckland All-Stars have it in the bag this year.
Mate, they've just got the most talented drivers in the country in at the moment. So you've got Tyson Wooten, good hitter. You've got a relation of mine, Randy Tarrant.
No, I'm actually a Bay Park / Rotorua supporter, but Auckland all the way.
Well, you have to back Gisborne, don't you? You have to. So yeah, I think they will. They've got a strong chance, but they always have a strong chance.
The Rotorua Rebels, we're sponsoring them.
Who won last year?
Yeah, they did. They did, backing a good team.
Brian Pekolski says it's anyone's trophy.
I'd like to say one of the local sides will win, but I think it's a very fair match-up this year with all the teams.
The Palmerston North Panthers and Manawatu Mustangs are flying the flag for local supporters.
Queen Elizabeth is celebrating her 96th birthday. The monarch travelled to her Sandringham estate in Norfolk to mark the occasion and spend it with friends and family. The BBC's Nicholas Witchell reports.
In the spring sunshine at Windsor Castle, a birthday greeting. Happy 96th birthday, Your Majesty, from the band of the Coldstream Guards. A message repeated in different ways in different locations. In Hyde Park in central London, the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery fired a 41-gun salute in tribute to the head of state. In Scotland, the gun salute was fired from the ramparts of Edinburgh Castle. And what of the recipient of so many birthday wishes? The Queen spent the day quietly at Sandringham. She was seen being driven around the estate, looking relaxed, reflecting perhaps that ahead lie a number of planned public appearances for her Platinum Jubilee.
Let's get to some of your feedback now. A lot of you getting in touch about the price of fruit and veggies. Annie says we grow all our own veggies and fruit. Very lucky. We can live on the smell of an oily rag this way. Another listener says I grow all my own and share with all my neighbours. Wow, you're generous. Wouldn't mind being your neighbour. Someone else says we can grow food. It's not that hard and practically free if you're privileged enough to have the space. And that is a good point. Tim reckons that veggie auctions advantage the supermarkets and cut out smaller bidders and would like us to have a look at that. And Helen says I grow some of my own, especially salad crops and raised beds. Have just harvested tomatoes and planted winter crops, leeks, yum, love a leek, and broad beans. These won't supply all our needs, but they will help, says Helen. Someone says Avondale markets have the cheapest produce in Auckland. So that's a good tip.
RNZ News at 6. Good evening, kia ora tātou. I'm Evie Ashton. The family of a 90-year-old live-in woman who died after being attacked in her home are unimpressed one of her killers has been granted parole. Grace Virtue died 25 days after the invasion of her property in Horowhenua, where she lived alone, in November 2019. A teenage girl aged 17 was jailed for 2.5 years for Mrs Virtue's manslaughter. The parole board has today confirmed the teen will be released from prison. Mrs Virtue's daughter-in-law, Jenny Virtue, says she's not impressed and not surprised, labelling the justice system as a joke. The teen was 15 at the time of the home invasion, which involved her and 2 other girls who were aged 14 and 15. Some fruit and vegetable growers say they may be forced to let crops rot as record inflation takes hold. Inflation has reached a 30-year high of 6.9%. Tomatoes, broccoli and lettuce prices have increased by more than 50% year on year, but growers say they could go up even more. The president of United Fresh, Jerry Prendergast, says increasing costs are hitting them hard.
Excessive costs, not only your normal fertilisers, which is a direct reflection of what's happening in Ukraine, the increased costs of wages, fuel, rates and insurances.
Jerry Prendergast says some growers are weighing up whether they can actually afford to sell their produce. A lawyer representing the whānau of a Taranaki man shot and killed by police says unfortunately his death isn't unique. 22-year-old Chaos Price was shot after he rammed a police car on State Highway 3 between New Plymouth and Waitara on Saturday night. Police say he was attempting to hijack a member of the public's vehicle when the fatal shots were fired. He was unarmed and no firearms were recovered from the scene. Justice advocate Julia Faiputsi says the numbers don't lie and police killings disproportionately involve Māori. She says the issue is not young Māori men behaving badly, but the actions of the Crown and police. One of the 13 people reported to have died with COVID-19 today was aged between 10 and 19. Others were in their 70s or older, as Jean Edwards reports.
The Ministry of Health has reported a further 9,390 community cases of COVID-19. 522 people are in hospital, 15 of whom are in ICU or high dependency units. The person aged between 10 and 19 is one of the youngest New Zealanders to have died with the virus. The other 12 deaths reported today were people in their 70s, 80s and 90s. Auckland has the highest number of cases with more than 2,200, followed by Canterbury with just over 1,600. Health officials are urging people who are holidaying over the Anzac Day long weekend to have a plan in place in case they or a household contact catch the virus.
A resident of a central Canterbury town, which has been under a boil water notice for 2 months, says he has no faith a new body created under the Three Waters reforms would do any better than the local council. Springfield residents have been getting water from a tanker since February, and their water quality has been intermittent since flooding last year. Jack Wilson says the council's approach has been frustratingly slow, but he fears a larger organisation might be just as bad. Mr Wilson says he's approached government agencies over the current water situation and had no response. He says it's already hard to draw the attention of officials at the council's headquarters to their plight, and might be even harder with a bigger organisation. The president of the World Bank says Ukraine has suffered about $90 billion worth of physical damage following Russia's invasion of the country. That will rise further as the conflict continues. Early estimates of damages doesn't include the growing economic costs of the war to Ukraine. In a virtual address to the World Bank Forum, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky outlined the scale of the financial help his country needed. His words are translated.
At this time, we need up to $7 billion each month to make up for the economic losses. And we will need hundreds of billions of dollars to rebuild all this later.
Volodymyr Zelensky is calling for Russia's immediate exclusion from international financial institutions. And hospitality businesses in Palmerston North are expecting their biggest weekend of the year, with the Superstock Teams champs coming to town. The biggest motorsport event in New Zealand was due to go ahead at Waitangi weekend before the move to a red COVID traffic light setting put the brakes on it. The co-owner of Brew Union, Murray Cleghorn, says with 10,000 visitors in town, it's a boon for business.
So I think it'll be good. It'll be a good spirit lifter for everyone to have a good level of energy, and we're expecting pretty heavy bookings. I heard town's pretty much booked out.
Murray Cleghorn says the team champs add more than $5 million to the region's economy. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Country Life invites you to stay awake and smell the coffee as the team visits this country's first commercial plantation. That's climate change for you. Jackie Brown, actor, comedian, writer and mother, selects a mixtape. And because it's Anzac weekend, the weekend we commemorate our war dead, but also celebrate trans-Tasman mateship, we've got a Sonic Tonic dedicated to old friends. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
You're back with Lisa Owen on Checkpoint next. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Saturday. From Northlands to Waikato, also Taumarinui, Coromandel, Taupo and Western Bay of Plenty. Cloudy periods with isolated showers. For Eastern Bay of Plenty, as well as Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, rain, possibly heavy with thunderstorms and localised downpours, easing to showers this evening. Becoming fine in the Bay of Plenty tomorrow. For the remainder of the North Island and also for Nelson, isolated showers are spreading north until tonight, and again in the west late tomorrow, otherwise fine. For Buller and Westland, mostly fine with the odd shower north of Hokitika. Cloud and showers are increasing tomorrow afternoon. Marlborough, Canterbury and Otago, except for Clutha, a few showers today, fine tomorrow. For Clutha, Southland and Fiordland, showers mainly about Fiordland and the south coast, turning to rain in Fiordland tomorrow evening. And for the Chatham Islands, mostly cloudy, rain this evening, possibly heavy, and then a few showers tomorrow. The time is 6 minutes past 6. We'll have news headlines for you at 6:30.
Ngā mihi iwi, no mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. A lawyer representing the whānau of a Taranaki man shot and killed by police says their statements about the incident are insensitive. 22-year-old Chaos Price was shot after he rammed a police car on State Highway 3 between New Plymouth and Waitara on Saturday night. He was not carrying a firearm. Our Taranaki Whanganui reporter Robin Martin has more.
Police say Chaos Price drove at speed into a stationary police car, shunting it off the road, disabling his own vehicle in the process. They say he was fatally shot by officers while attempting to hijack a member of the public's car. In a lengthy statement about the details of the incident, police revealed Mr Price was unarmed and no firearms were recovered at the scene. Justice Advocate Julia Waiputi says the nature and timing of the police statement couldn't be worse.
And that level of detail, and the police to put in that time and level of detail in public relays, whilst whānau is still waiting to bury their boy. You know, they need to bury, the whānau need to grieve, and at the same time, the police statement seem in reaction to public response and not with whānau in mind.
Ms Waiputi says regrettably Mr Price's death is not unique.
This is not the first young Māori boy that has been killed by police. Unfortunately, not just a statistic that's out of nowhere. We see the numbers for police killing young Māori, and it is disproportionate, it is huge, it is whānau being taken away far too early by Crown and police action.
She says the issue is not about the poor behaviour of young Māori males. Specialist firearms lawyer Nicholas Taylor told Midday Report he's not convinced there was an active threat when police shot dead Chaos Price.
A car, of course, can be a weapon. However, it would appear from what's been released in the facts at the moment that he was trying to effect an escape. So getting into a car, taking a car and removing himself from the scene.
Mr Taylor says police need to be more willing to use non-lethal methods for diffusing volatile situations.
Be it tasers, be it pepper sprays, be it police dogs, and even in a situation like this, just obviously potentially identifying someone and diffusing the situation by going and collecting them or in a day or so.
Former police negotiator Lance Burdett says even if Chaos Price appeared to be running away, officers could have been justified in shooting him.
What the officer has to then make an assessment of is if the person getting into another car, is it still a threat? Is it a threat to the police getting into a car and coming back at them, or are they going to be a threat to others when they drive away at speed? So it's an assessment you make at the time.
Mr Burdett says that assessment would be based on the person's immediate past actions. On the streets of New Plymouth, there were mixed views on whether the shooting was justified.
I feel like it probably could have been de-escalated.
Depending on how intense that ram was. If it's like a real malicious intent, then maybe you'd have to neutralise it.
Facts are not all out.
I'd have to go with the police have to do what they've got to do.
Oh, absolutely. I think it was justified, yeah.
I support our police. I trust in them. They're here to keep us safe.
Probably not. Unless, if your life's in danger.
There are 3 separate investigations underway into Chaos Price's death. His body has been lying at the family home and his funeral is due to be held tomorrow.
New Zealand Rugby has appointed the former Governor-General Dame Patsy Reddy to its board. Dame Patsy joins respected rugby administrator Rowena Davenport as NZR board appointees. The move comes in the wake of the damning results of the Black Ferns Cultural Review. The 9-person board now has 3 female directors, still falling short of Sport New Zealand's 40% diversity threshold for boards. In a statement, NZR board chair Stuart Mitchell says the organisation still had work to do around gender diversity in rugby governance. Davenport said NZR is moving in the right direction when it comes to diversity.
We really want to ensure that diversity in all its forms and there's greater equity right across the sport. There's a lot of positive inroads into achieving that, and my appointment to the board, Dame Patsy Reddy's appointment, I think they're all positive steps towards achieving these goals.
She acknowledges NZR is facing challenges in the immediate and long-term future.
We all know that the sporting landscape is changing here and globally rather rapidly, and it's pretty obvious to all involved that rugby in New Zealand hasn't kept up. So there's a real opportunity to adapt and innovate the games.
New Zealand Rugby will make another appointment to the board at next month's AGM. There's still no collection for soft plastics in the top of the South Island, despite the scheme restarting nationwide more than 2 years ago. The scheme stopped in 2018 when offshore plants said they didn't want it. There's now more ability to process plastics onshore, with hopes the scheme will expand even further across the Motu. Here's our Nelson Marlborough reporter Samantha G.
For those in many parts of the South Island, it's been a long time since they could recycle soft plastics. Anything like bread and vegetable bags, bubble wrap and food packets. Last year, the nationwide scheme diverted 260 tonnes of soft plastic from landfill. That's about 14 million bags or wrappers. But if you live north of Christchurch or south of Dunedin, there are still no places you can take it to be recycled. Soft Plastics Recycling Scheme Manager Lynn Mays says from the end of this week, people will be able to buy a bag at the post shop they can fill with soft plastics and send away for recycling.
There's probably about 75% of the population have now got access to a soft plastics recycling bin at one of their local stores. But for Areas like Nelson and Marlborough and those that don't currently have bins, this will be a good opportunity for people to recycle until we get bins into place.
Every piece collected is now processed in New Zealand. The scheme was reintroduced in partnership with Future Post, which turns soft plastics into fencing products. About 1,500 bags are used to make a single fence post, with the company producing about 800 posts a day.
The good news is that processing capacity is increasing, and so we can now expand our collection service to match the processing capacity, which is a fabulous position for us to be in.
But Lynn Mays says logistics make establishing new collection points difficult.
Don't want to add more vehicles on the roads, because that doesn't make sense and doesn't sit terribly comfortably with us either from a carbon footprint perspective. We want to be able to maximise using backhauling, or, as I say, if and when Future Post have their plant in South Island, that makes things a whole lot simpler.
Wastemen's Territorial Authorities Forum Chair Sophie Mander says plastic waste is a significant environmental challenge for Aotearoa.
Soft plastics regularly end up in landfills and waterways, in our ocean, and they litter our natural environment. So shifting away from hard to recycle single-use plastics, including soft plastics, will definitely help us reduce waste, improve our recycling systems, and it will protect the environment.
Sophie Mander says soft plastics are still being found in curbside collections, which goes to landfill or causes problems at recycling sorting facilities. A recent audit of the Queenstown Lakes District Council curbside collection found just over 3% of the average recycling bin was soft plastic, and 51% of all plastic in the average rubbish bin was non-recyclable plastic or soft.
Here in the South Island, we only have soft plastic recycling opportunities in a couple of the big cities, so Dunedin and Christchurch. For communities in some of the smaller urban areas of New Zealand, it's still really, really problematic.
Countdown is one of the scheme's main project partners, with collection bins in just over half of its stores around the country. Its Director of Sustainability, Kiri Hanafin, says when the recycling scheme stopped, customers were frustrated and disappointed. And when it restarted, some stores were inundated with what people had stockpiled.
People are in a good habit now of just bringing back their soft plastics. Or, you know what, taking it out as they leave the store, taking their biscuit wrappers out and sticking it straight in. So it's a good scheme.
Kiri Hanafin says retailers have a responsibility to provide collection points in their communities.
Obviously, we are the conduit of a lot of soft plastic. You know, lots of our products are packaged in soft plastic, and similarly, we're a supplier of food as well, and some of our products are in soft plastic. So I think, producers absolutely have a responsibility to support these schemes, in terms of paying levies and fees, which we do, but also providing easy access to customers.
For those who can't recycle for now, the best thing consumers can do is avoid single-use plastics wherever possible.
It is 16 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. The mayor of the besieged Ukrainian city of Mariupol says the lives of 120,000 civilians there are in the hands of Russian President Vladimir Putin. Mariupol has endured intense bombardment under Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Ukraine and the US dispute Russia's claims the city has fallen into its control. The ABC's Sarah Sedgi reports.
Performing in front of an audience in Warsaw, the Kiev Symphony Orchestra, many members now displaced, is hoping to share a message as it tours Europe.
We have a really important mission with our orchestra. We need to say to the world that we are Ukrainians, we have our own culture and we have our own history.
I think in the context of what Putin says, that Ukrainians do not deserve to be a nation, I think this is an artistic protest, a manifesto that he is gravely wrong.
In their homeland, the fate of the port city Mariupol is unclear. Russia's President Vladimir Putin is claiming victory, but Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says Ukrainians remain defending their land.
I know that they've captured most of Mariupol. We're all well aware of it. There's also a part of our city where our troops who stayed there are stationed. They still remain there.
The city's mayor, Vadim Boychenko, says fighters are still defending the city's large steel plant, where civilians are also sheltering. There are tens of thousands more civilians trapped in the city.
It's important to understand that the lives that are still there, they're in the hands of just one person, Vladimir Putin.
Vadim Boychenko says Russia has been hiding evidence of war crimes in the city by burying bodies in a mass grave. And he says Russia is standing in the way of those trying to get out safely.
They undermined this evacuation. They've named the places where the evacuation would take place from. They've asked us to give them a map of where the evacuation will start from. We gave them the map. They asked, how many buses do you have? We gave the number of buses, and they destroyed and demolished all of those places. They destroyed our buses. They have undermined the key evacuation.
US President Joe Biden describes this as a critical moment in the war, where Russian forces will set the stage for the next phase. He's announced another round of military assistance to Ukraine and additional economic assistance. The package will include heavy artillery weapons, tactical drones and armoured vehicles. US Secretary of Defence Lloyd Austin.
I know what painful days these are for Ukraine. Your people are suffering terribly after Russia's cruel and unjust invasion. But the world has been inspired by your courage as you fight for your independence, and you do not stand alone.
The US has also announced a streamlined process for Ukrainian refugees wanting to resettle there.
Portuguese prosecutors have formally identified a suspect in the disappearance of British toddler Madeleine McCann 15 years ago. Madeleine vanished from her bedroom during a family holiday in the Algarve region in 2007. The BBC's Simon Jones reports.
Next month, it will be 15 years since Madeleine McCann disappeared. What happened to her remains a mystery, despite numerous international investigations. It's been agony for her parents. They've always clung to the hope that their daughter is still alive. But the authorities in Germany strongly believe Madeleine was murdered. And now prosecutors in Portugal, looking into what happened in Praia da Luz, have identified a suspect, a person of interest, acting on the request of the German authorities. He's not been named, but German police have been investigating this man, referred to as Christian B., a convicted rapist, in connection with Madeleine's disappearance. He's currently in jail. Officers say he was regularly living in the Algarve between 1995 and 2007. He has always denied any involvement.
Guten Abend, liebe Zuschauer, herzlich willkommen.
There have been TV appeals for information, but the authorities have never had enough evidence to charge him. Madeleine went missing from a holiday apartment on the 3rd of May 2007 while her parents were having dinner at a nearby restaurant. In July 2013, the Met Police opened its own investigation, saying it had new evidence and new witnesses. And it was in June 2020 that German police first revealed they had a suspect. There have been searches in Portugal, but no breakthrough. In less than 2 weeks, a statute of limitations would take effect, meaning under Portuguese law it would no longer be possible to make someone a person of interest. But it's understood this latest development is driven not by timing, but by strong indications that a crime has taken place. There have been many false dawns in the investigations into what happened. The police in Germany have previously warned their inquiry, like the others, could end without a charge. But Madeleine's parents have always said they need to know what happened so they can find peace.
Hollywood actor Johnny Depp has been grilled about his drug use and graphic text messages about his ex-wife, Amber Heard. Mr Depp is suing Ms Heard for defamation after she wrote an article for the Washington Post in 2018 in which she described herself as a victim of domestic violence. CNN's Stephanie Elam has more.
Sometimes drink whiskey in the mornings too, right?
Isn't happy hour any time?
Johnny Depp amusing the courtroom.
Oh, you're crazy.
Even as the defense drills down on his past drug and alcohol use.
One of your good friends that you've taken drugs with before is Marilyn Manson, right?
We've had cocaine together maybe a couple of times.
The defense showing this photo of Depp in Boston while making the film Black Mass. Depp claimed he was asleep, The defense claimed an email between Depp and a nurse proves otherwise.
After she's telling you that she's watching Black Mass for the third time in a row, you write, "I was high as a motherfucker when I made that film. Ha ha ha."
The defense casting Depp as full of anger.
Got this going.
The testimony turning even more crude when the defense used Depp's messages to a friend to show his rage toward Heard.
After you said, "Let's drown her before we burn her," Mr. Depp, you said, "I will her burnt corpse afterwards to make sure she is dead."
But yesterday, Depp claimed Heard was the aggressor, even severing his finger, which she denies.
She threw the large bottle and it made contact.
The defense showing writings from Depp in paint and blood from his severed finger, and an email where Depp alludes to cutting the finger himself.
"I have chopped off my left middle finger as a reminder that I should never cut my finger off again."
It was a pathetic attempt at humor. My apologies.
Depp's $50 million defamation suit against his ex-wife is in response to Heard's 2018 op-ed in the Washington Post about surviving domestic abuse. While she never mentioned Depp, he asserts it got him booted from the starring role in Disney's Pirates of the Caribbean series. The defense implied there was abuse by Depp in the marriage. Depp denies he ever struck any woman. The couple met in 2009 on the set of The Rum Diary and married in 2015. Before their contentious divorce the following year, with both accusing the other of abusive behavior.
The number of Ukrainians who have fled Russia's invasion now tops 5 million people, according to the United Nations. But a growing number of people are returning home, even as the war rages on. CNN's Scott McLean reports from Poland.
In the early days of war, trains leaving Ukraine were standing room only, packed with terrified women and children. Trains going the other way were virtually empty. As the bombs fell and the tanks rolled, millions desperately tried to get out, most to Poland. Almost 2 months later, there are now days when more people go back into Ukraine from Poland than come out.
Do you think that the mass exodus is over?
No, we can never say that. We cannot. It's hard to predict actually the direction of the crisis.
In Przemyśl, the first stop in Poland for many Ukrainians traveling by train, the mayor was once overwhelmed by the number of refugees showing up every day. Not anymore.
It looks better. We better organized as well after the 2 months of experience, and we happy. We are so happy that situation on Ukraine looks better at this moment.
Inside the station, Natalia Belchik and her family are headed back to their hometown in southern Ukraine, about 50 miles from the contested city of Mykolaiv.
In our town, we had about 7 or 8 people killed at a military unit when it was bombed. My child was so scared.
They fled to a small town in northern Germany, where the government put them up in a nice hotel. But they say they had little help beyond that.
We didn't know what to do. Nobody helped us to find jobs. Well, we were told we needed to speak German.
You're willing to take a small risk to get your life back?
Yes, we want to go back. After all, home is home.
Down the hall, Natalia Vuhivska fled Kyiv just days into the war. While she stayed with friends in Germany, her neighborhood withstood Russian shelling. Now that the Russians have retreated, she's going back.
It's a bit scary, but I've been looking forward to seeing my husband. I never thought this would last a long time. I thought it would be for a week or two. I don't want to start a new life in Germany without my husband.
At the border, the lineup to get into Ukraine stretches for 5 miles. And at the Polish side of the pedestrian crossing, there are more volunteers than refugees.
No.
Oksana Derish is going back to see her parents in Lviv.
But actually for Easter, because I want to meet my parents. I miss them very, very much.
Sir David Attenborough has been named a Champion of the Earth by the UN's Environment Programme. The award recognises the veteran broadcaster's devotion to telling stories about the natural world and climate change. The head of the Environment Programme says Sir David's programmes help people fall in love with the planet. The BBC's Justin Rowlett has more.
And let me just say that we are deeply honoured to...
Like so much of life today, this award ceremony was conducted over the internet. But there was nothing virtual about Sir David's delight.
Oh, you have the award. Wow.
And I'm truly, truly extremely honoured. You know, the United Nations, we're in a new era. The United Nations without them, we will never solve the environmental crisis. The world has to get together.
Hidden beneath the waves, right beneath my feet, there are creatures beyond our imagination.
Only a concerted effort by the countries of the world will do, Sir David tells Inga Anderson, the head of the UN Environment Programme.
We know what the problems are, and we know how to solve them. All we lack is unified action.
Right.
These problems cannot be solved by one nation, no matter how big that single nation is.
We've also recognised an uncomfortable fact. The health of our oceans is under threat.
But Sir David has not lost hope. Look how many whale species have come back from the brink of extinction, he says.
The message is that it can be done. The message is that it is possible. The message is that the natural world has more resources than we can possibly imagine. We've worked out how to kill them. Now we could give them a chance for them to come back and save themselves and save us.
A characteristically rousing call to action from Sir David just weeks before he celebrates his 96th birthday.
Before we head off on Fatburgs, this person says, I'm very careful what I pour down my drain. If we reduce packaging and practice intelligent disposal, we can massively reduce waste. Another person says, we're eating dinner, please. I did warn you. That's all we've got time for this evening. The late news team's going to keep you updated throughout the night. If you missed anything on the program, you know the Fatburg interview and you want to catch up on it, go on to Spotify, Apple or wherever you get your podcasts from. Kaua e wareware te atatero I a mātou kōrero. You can check out our videos and stories online. Have a fantastic weekend.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Kia ora tātou, I'm Evie Ashton. The family of a 90-year-old live-in woman who died after being attacked in her home are labelling the justice system a joke as one of the killers is granted parole. Some vegetable growers say it's becoming too expensive to sell their produce with the rising cost of fertiliser, wages, rates and insurance. Several anti-mandate protesters from the occupation of Parliament have appeared in the Wellington District Court, and a British patient may have the longest COVID infection on record, with detectable levels of the virus for more than 16 months. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7 o'clock.
How long do you think New Zealanders could realistically be expecting supply shortages and supply chain delays to continue?
It's likely to go till the end of the year, and